point. So let's go back to the beginning then. What was that impending event that meant that you actually set up your own recruitment company?
Well, when I realised I wasn't going to be Britney Spears, my dad told me to get a proper job. So I actually fell into recruitment. So I went and temped for Blue Arrow, and then they offered me a job internally. I worked for a few branches, and then they offered me my own branch at Chatham, where I met Claire. And I was really happy there. It was great company, but then the company got bought out and everything changed. We got a new regional manager, the ethos changed, and Claire said, maybe we need a change. And so she suggested it, and then we started doing it for ourselves. But that's not the end of the story, because after 20 years, we were approached, and in 2018 we sold, had 3 branches, but a fantastic team as well that are going to do wonders.
So I started my training and recruitment company 18 years ago, Connemara UK, because my daughter was going to school. I was a single mum. She was 4.5. She was going to get 14 weeks holiday, and I was getting 5 where I was working. So it was nothing to do with the fact that I had this burning desire to go out on my own. I'd always worked for a corporate for 13 years, was quite happy. But actually, that impending event and realising this isn't going to work, let's do it myself. What about you? What was your reason?
Mine's not quite as legitimate as yours. I had a boss who left, who I thought was absolutely amazing. And the guy who took over, I didn't like, and I wasn't prepared to work for him. And I'd been there for quite a long time, 7, 8, 9 years. And I was like, I'm just not prepared to do this. And in keeping with lots of my personality, I was like, I thought it, I did it. I just resigned, and I had to go and find something else. So that's how I started up.
Okay, so I started with a company as a trainee, and I'd worked there for 8 years, and I'd had a really successful career. Recruitment was just right for me. I love people, and getting involved with people and understanding different businesses was brilliant. But I got to that age where I wanted to have a baby, and I was married, and I wanted to have a child. And so I thought, I'll tell you what, my big boss, she's had a baby now, so she'll be a little bit more understanding. So I thought I will get everything set up, have just a few months off, and get back to my career. And as soon as I told everybody that I was pregnant, the management, the way they treated me was absolutely appalling. And throughout the sort of 7 months before I left them when I was pregnant, I realised that actually my clients were being taken away from me. My career was really, I felt vulnerable. I felt at a time when you've got a baby on board, and how you're going to move forward in your life is so important, and I just felt insecure, and the way they treated me was appalling. So I decided while I was pregnant to set up my own business, and when I had my daughter, I set up DP Connect.
Well, I think I was always destined to have my own company, pretty much because as we were talking in the pre-show chat, we're like controlling the show and being your own boss and all that kind of stuff. But it was when I was pregnant with my second child back in 2014, and I hate to say it, but the recruitment industry is still not set up for working parents. Certainly not in my experience. And I say this to the people I work with all the time, but I think there comes an epiphany, we call it, in that you kind of realise that you're making all this cash, these hundreds of thousands of pounds for other people, and you think, hang on a minute, I could be doing that just for me. And that's the epiphany. And after that, I certainly couldn't be employed anymore.
So I think many people, you make these decisions based on what you don't want to do rather than what you want to do, or you reach a point where you think, God, I can't cope with this anymore. What else could I do? For me, it's like perverse. My family, particularly my parents, thought I was an absolute fruitcake. So I was a lawyer working in a city law firm, spent some time in Hong Kong, making good money, mid-late 20s, and decided that I just loathed working as a solicitor, loathed the whole sort of institutionalism of the professions, and I decided I wanted to do something else. So I took myself off to business school for a year, and not knowing what I wanted to do. And the Damascene conversion, the moment that really got me was we had a module course on that year on entrepreneurship, and all it was visiting entrepreneurs, people that came along talking about their stories. So we had the Richard Bransons of the world, and we had people who'd done amazing things, but there was also people who had just quietly gone about doing little things, and maybe they're motivated for different reasons, control their own destiny, just not wanting to take orders from anyone else. And some of these stories resonated. And there's one guy in particular who'd made a fortune on property development on the west coast of America. And he gave some advice to those that are listening to him, which I thought was useful. And at the time was sort of, before sort of social science really kicked off, which was the law of retrospection. And what he suggested very strongly, and this is something which applies now to anybody who's interested in thinking about what they might want to be doing in the long term, which is project yourself forward, not just the 5 years, what you do in 5-year question, we have an interview question, but 20 years. Yeah. And actually say, well, okay, really visualize waking up in the morning. Where are you waking up? Who with? Are you in the country, in town? Are you going to go downstairs and have breakfast? Are you going to go commute into work, or you're not? Do you live in a big house, small house by the sea? And just really unpack that. And then work backwards as to how the hell you got there. And that can give you a very clear sort of sense of, well, what's going to be important to you in the long term. And for me, it was, I don't want to work for anybody else. At least that's the sort of the motivation was to be in control of your own career and destiny. So age 27, wherever I was, 28 at the time, I left business school and went straight into, more or less, setting up the first business.
I'd always wanted to have my own business, Angela. I just didn't know what it was going to be. And I've only ever worked for 3 agencies, including my own, in 20 years. And I joined an independent, but a larger independent. And we got into 2008, back end of it, and we had the recession, made a lot of people redundant. And it was at that point that I thought, do you know what, maybe I can do this for myself. I was already working from home, and LHR was born from that. So wasn't probably the brightest thing I did, because it was in a recession. There's lots of candidates, no jobs. I was a single parent, 2 teenagers, a big mortgage and a car loan. But we're still here.
Well, this was an interesting question, because when I looked at it, I kind of thought, well, there wasn't an event that made me want to start a startup. I never intentionally was going to start my own business, but I suppose actually there was an event. So I've been working in the city for a few years. I was already, a good few years into my recruitment career. I was working for a really good business. I used a rec-to-rec to secure my role, and also used rec-to-recs to hire for my team. Made a very conscious decision that I wanted to move away from the sector that I was working in, and chose to work in rec-to-rec. I saw a big gap in the market as far as a quality service was concerned, or actually at the time any kind of service, if I'm honest. And so I left that job and I went to go and work for a rec-to-rec business that was established in the market. It had other divisions as well in that business, and I worked with some really, really inspirational people. But I didn't intend, when I chose my sector, to necessarily set up my own business. But I guess kind of events over the next sort of 20 months kind of led me to that. My sector is particularly tough. It's really difficult. And when you're working in a business that, demands delivery in terms of revenue, I guess for me there was a little bit of a gap between being really consultative and generating revenue. So there was a little bit of question around what we were doing and why we were doing it and who we were doing it for. And I did kind of question, I would like to have the freedom to work with clients in a certain way, and it was more quantity over quality. And then a really stupid situation arose. I was talking to a client. It was actually Tara Ricks.
Oh wow!
From Jocelyn Rowe. At the time, she was CEO of Jocelyn Rowe, and those that remember working back in the city in those days, Jocelyn Rowe, amazing business. Tara Ricks, amazing woman, and I really wanted to work with her as a client. And I was talking to her about her business requirements, and she happened to mention that they were looking for an internal recruiter, and would I be interested in talking to them about that? And I flirted with the idea. We had a conversation, but really I just wanted Jocelyn Rowe as a client. And I went to go and meet with Tara, I think it was on a Friday. And then on the Sunday night, I got a call from my then boss saying, can you come in early tomorrow morning? We need to have a conversation, which is never a call you want to get on a Sunday night, is it? It's like, oh, what have I done? What have I done? And when I got in on the Monday, it was, you've been spotted at Jocelyn Row, and I know that you're interviewing elsewhere. Well, I'm sorry, but somebody that works in rec to rec, it's not unusual for a recruiter to be spotted at a recruitment business, right? So that didn't really sit down very well. But it was very clear that the conversations that Tara and I had over email had been followed by, had been picked up by my business, and they had assumed that I was actively looking outside of the business, and so they questioned my loyalty. And when I said that's not the case, and this is literally 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, that's not the case, and questioned my loyalty, and then kind of said that actually, you know, you're lying. There's not many things that gets my back up, but if you question my integrity or you call me a liar, then fur is going to fly. And if they'd have just said, look, we've read your emails and we've assumed this is going on, that would have been fine, but that wasn't the case. And so I did what any normal, level-headed, sensible person would do, and that was walk back to my desk, clear it, and walk out, and then set up in direct competition with them the next day. Now, I would not advise this to anybody. I was just really angry. I was really angry. And so that's I never intended to set up my own business, but I did. That was in March 2008. And, you know, obviously we had the financial crisis in September 2008. So I picked my time really perfectly, but actually the first 2 years of running that business were just incredible. And I worked with some amazing people at that business. So, but it was never my intention to set up my own company. Actually, it really wasn't.
Yes. Well, there was a specific event. I was working as an interviewer, they used to call them in those days, for a company called Allengate, which was a kind of group of specialist recruiters. And we were all very frightened of the owner and the chairman. His name was Alan Perrier. But they gave great training. So I was kind of galloping along, doing quite well, being employed by somebody else. And then one afternoon, he came into the office and sort of looked at me because I was the junior and asked if I'd go and feed his meter, and sort of gave me a big pile of coins because it was all, you know, putting money in those days. And so I had to go and feed this yellow Rolls Royce, his car meter, in Drury Lane, and walked around it and kind of couldn't believe it. It was like one of those old-fashioned yellow Rolls Royces from an old film, you know, and it was probably worth a fortune. And I remember putting the money in the meter, thinking, do you know, I think I'd rather be one of the queens than one of the worker bees. And that was the moment when I thought, you know, I think I'd rather set up my own business if the rewards are like this than work for somebody else. So that was the moment.
Did you ever buy a Rolls Royce?
No comment. I'm taking the Second Amendment on this one, I'm afraid.
It wasn't anything I particularly planned. So I worked for a leading specialist recruitment firm. I was very happy. I loved my job. I'd been there, I think, for about 5 years. But I was working a lot of hours, like a lot of recruiters do. And I'd not long been married. And I think my husband just thought there was a little bit more to life than the amount I was working. And as with a lot of agencies, every year my targets grew and expectations grew. And I got to the point where I just thought, enough. So I decided that, you know, I remember my husband saying to me, what's the worst thing that could happen? He ran his own business. So I thought, yeah, actually, what is the worst thing that could happen? So I resigned and set up Vanilla, thinking I've got some money saved. It was, you know, 16 and a half years ago. So life was slightly different then from a family perspective. And I just jumped in, and have to say, I've never regretted it, not even during the pandemic.
There's actually 3 impending events because it nearly happened once before, then it happened, and then it's happened again. So the first time was I was quite a successful recruiter for a company called Hill McGlynn, which is an old construction company. It's Randstad now own. I had a competitor who worked for another company called Anders Glaser Wills, which was a direct competitor in the same sector. We played football together, got chatting over beer. Why didn't we do our own thing? Actually got a business plan okayed by the Solent business sector. But when we're just about to sort of press the button to go, my wife fell pregnant and I got cold feet, and that was the event that stopped that happening back in 1990.
Wow.
So fast forward after that, I then joined the company Anders Glaser Wills, spent 12 years there, and actually forged a career and became their MD.
So that worked out okay in the end, really.
It worked out fine because I learnt with somebody else's money, actually, how to run a business. So we successfully grew that business and turned it into a company called Anders Elite. It was American owned, or partly American owned, and became fully American owned when the previous owner left back in '99. And because we'd grown a successful business, but because then the States got more involved because they fully owned it, it meant as MD, I was having to go across the States every couple of months, attending massive management meetings in the States with people just talking absolute corporate bullcrap and just wasting my time. And I think the one event that really sort of hit home to make me think, now this is not for me, was the CEO who was stood outside with all the other, they called them presidents, but the MDs of their other businesses in the States. And he was saying, yeah, we're in this flash golf complex. I don't even play golf. And he was saying, do you not much prefer being here than in a rainy Manchester? And I said, well, actually, I'd rather be in Manchester where I can actually make an improvement to our business rather than being here and not actually doing anything. So that wasn't the moment, but it was the moment for me. And I thought, right, okay. So I actually sought finance from banks to see if we could do a management buyout of that business, which we got the finance backing. We made a very healthy offer, but unfortunately for me at the time, Anders was making the profit for the group. So it wasn't the timing for the States, wasn't the right time to sell, although they have done since. So that was really the catalyst for me to set my own business up called Fusion People. So I left there in 2003, set the new business up and grew that quite successfully. We grew it very quickly from 0 to 40 million in 4 years, and then went on to 100 million plus over the next few years. So it's quite a really exciting ride. Then in 2016, I had a couple of things happen to me that made me think, do I really need to be doing this job anymore? We're in such a big company looking after so many staff and all this hassles and strains that was given me. I thought, no, I don't. I had an opportunity to sell some equity, so I came out of that. Looked at anything but to do recruitment. I thought I'd just do something different, but after a year, it sort of dragged me back, as recruitment tends to do. And I've ended up with a portfolio of about 10 different recruitment companies that I'm helping to grow.
I grew up on a farm. My father is an entrepreneur, and in German, this word means Unternehmertum. So you are doing something, And that means I grew up having business and private life also basically in one area. We would talk business all the time, at the table, in the evening, in the morning, but also, having private conversations. So for me, that was quite natural. And then I have to say, I always had this feeling. When I saw people, met people, I wanted to bring them together where I felt, okay, these two, they, should talk because they bring interesting perspective and they will grow with their conversation. So that's, I guess, why I, at the end, became an executive search consultant where, you look for your client, for the best match, for the best candidate in the market. And at the same time, you want this candidate to succeed and grow. And so that I guess was the the first incident. And then also, to be honest, I became entrepreneur after spending 10 years, 12 years in an executive search firm internationally, but then also wanted to combine family and business. I then, founded my family and only spent also the time at the airport and never at home, and having to fulfill other people's budget was also not what I found fulfilling. So that was the base of that, and that went and is still running very, very good. But then also 2 years ago, I met at a workshop where we had to discuss the topic of how to relaunch or reinvent your career. I met somebody, Carolina Yeo, and we fell in love professionally. So I started then a new business with her where we build up a platform where we support especially those individuals who took a longer break to come back into their careers, because we believe one career is not enough, and you can continue and you should follow your dreams all the way through. So this is now my second venture, so to say.
Well, it was a significant event. I don't know about other people, but I got fired. So I think that's probably quite common. I think I'd had very corporate jobs in big organisations. I was used to working with, in big multi-million-pound organisations with lots of infrastructure, and then the organisation that I was working with, the owner had made me certain promises, things, and it didn't pan out, and we fell out really. So I ended up unemployed really. And I think it takes for somebody like me. I'm a bit of a cautious Nelly, if I'm honest. I sort of had to be forced into doing it, and I'm glad really, because I think there's no way I would have done some of the things that I've done and made as much money as I've done if I'd have been working for somebody else. It doesn't work like that. If you work for yourself, the opportunity is there. So I think it forced me to do it. It was a terrifying experience. I was scared. I didn't know whether I could get a job, whether I could pay my mortgage, pay for my kids' schools, whatever, all of that type of stuff. So it's pretty scary. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. What I actually did was I reached out on LinkedIn and via email, etc., to every person I'd ever met in my entire life, my black book basically, and said, "This is me. I can do this, that, and the other. Does anybody want to talk to me about anything?" It could be a job, could be setting up a business with me, just anything. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I had a series of lots of meetings with people. Sometimes they're just inquisitive, nosy, wanted to know what happened to me, I suppose. And luckily I met two guys who were prepared to, it was funny actually, because what happened was they had a big recruitment business and they didn't know, they just wanted to talk to me. And when I came away from it, I thought, you know what, I know what I can do here. I can set up a payroll business for them and they can be my first client. And I needed quite a lot of money as well. So I sort of slept on it. And then that night, up to maybe 3 a.m, I put together a load of slides with this massive financial number attached to it, this business plan. It was amazing. Sent it to them. And that morning I was on the phone to one of them at 8:30 a.m. He said, "Yeah, this is interesting, isn't it?" About 3 months of discussion and debate about what we were going to do. And eventually they put up the money and off I went.
Yeah, so I was working for a small Japanese boutique in Tokyo. Japanese president, 3-4 people. And we were making a lot of money. This is in the kind of 1997, around that time. So a long time ago, been in recruiting for 25 years now. And I I went to the guy with a business proposal, basically to scale the business, use some of the money we were making to invest back into the business and growth. And he just wasn't interested. I mean, he just wanted to run it as a lifestyle business, which is fair enough. That's his choice. He owned 100% of the stock. But it just wasn't for me. You know, I was interested in more the managerial track, leadership track, scaling track. So I left and started a business called CDS, which I sold 10 years later to Recruit Holdings, just before the GFC and Lehman shock, actually, when the multiples were high and expectations were even higher.
Well, at the time that I was married to somebody who is in a small family telecoms business. They sold the business and he got in a couple of £100,000, which, 20 years ago was probably quite a considerable amount of money. And I think the dream at the time was to go and build, find a plot of land and build a house. And then when we started looking into the tax side of things, we found it was far more effective to set up a business. So sort of Ruella James was born. And I suppose at the time I'd been using a number of R2Rs in the business that I was working within. At the time, to be fair, sorry, they weren't so good. I know there are some really great names out there now. And I just became a very reluctant MD of a recruitment business.
Well, I think the impending possibility of becoming a director, I was working for what was then a small financial recruitment company called Baden & Clark. There were only a handful of us. And having done a business degree, I knew about being a director and what the fiscal statutory responsibilities, etc. And it was mooted, and I asked if I could see the accounts. Now, we were just around the corner from Company's House, and I'd already seen the accounts. In fact, I had them in my desk, but I just wanted to gauge the level of involvement I would have. And I was told, oh no, you don't need to worry about those, dear boy. You don't need to worry about those. And I thought, right, this is not the sort of company I want to be a director of. And I wanted to do it myself. So I built a commercial industrial accountancy recruitment business for them. So I looked for somewhere else where I could do that as well, and started a business under the aegis of Harrison Willis, and built it from there, and then ended up incorporating HW into my business and getting to a few hundred people and floating it, and buying it in an MBO and then floating it and then selling it to TMP, and it became what is now known as Hudson, but nothing to do.
If I'm honest, it was never my dream really ever to have my own business. I mean, maybe back in my mind, we all like the idea of it, be your own boss, but it was never my dream. I loved the company I worked for, and I had some amazing experiences working for the S3 group for Progressive. Learned so much about recruitment, worked with some phenomenal people. I think I had some really, really great standards instilled in me, and just learned those sales skills. But towards the end of my time there, around about the time of the credit crunch, for those that were too young to remember that was the last crisis we had pre-COVID. It was clear to me that as the business kind of moved in a different direction, you became you almost felt you were less of an individual and more of a number. And I really started to get annoyed by that over a sort of 6 to 12 month period of feeling like, whereas once you were really valued for who you were and what you did, now it was all about what number was on the bottom of a page. And towards the end of the time I was there, when they eventually shut a couple of offices down, I was actually offered jobs in Sydney, in Manchester, and in London. I was managing an office in Leeds at the time. But by that point, I'd already thought to myself, no, I'm not feeling it anymore. So I'm going to take the brave/foolish step of trying to start a business up in a credit crunch. So yeah, hence me being here now. Yeah.